Carlos Nelson here with the Kansas City Business Association, and our guest today is Miss Melissa Robinson, who is a current school board member who represents the 3rd District.
I represent the 4th
Fourth
district for
district.
the Kansas City Public Schools.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Could you tell our audience a little bit about what you've been doing with the school district?
Absolutely. I've been on the school board for 5 years. For the past 3 years, I've had the opportunity to serve as your board chair, and mainly that's a facilitator. We're facilitating our board of 9 to make sure that we have the agenda of the people in front of us and that we are evaluating our superintendent and supporting our administration to ensure that our Kansas City Public Schools is moving in the right direction.
Tell our audience, for the ones that don't know, how many board members are there?
There are 9 school board members, and this election cycle in April will go from 9 members to 7. The state legislature several years back wanted us to and passed the law for us to go from 9 members to 7. And so many of the school districts across the state have 7 members, and so our election, all of our seats will be up. And this is something that's unprecedented across the nation, where you have all 100% of the seats being up. We had to do redistricting, which we had to redraw the lines in advance of the 2020 census.
How does that look for the African American community here?
Well, it is it's a critical issue, because when you draw the lines in advance of the census, we do that because we have a complete accounting of who the representation needs to look like, how the lines are drawn based on population.
Can I say this? It was my understanding, I learned last week, that this turnover was there, and the deadline for applying for to run was last Tuesday, and we really didn't have a whole lot of candidates running from our community. You might know a little more about that.
Well, please keep in mind I'm running for the 3rd District
right.
and District City Council seat, so a lot of our attention has been to that as it relates to the April election that's coming up. However, we would have liked to see more African American candidates from our community.
And what would you say to the young adults that what their responsibility is to their community?
Absolutely. Right now, we're really focused on the federal elections. We're focused on what's happening in the White House, and we know that those things matter, but it's the down ballot races, like the school board, like the city council, that's going to impact you the most. And
all politics are local.
All politics are local, so it is critical that we are participating in our school board elections, because how we're educating our next generation is the direction of our city and where we're going to go. And so it's extremely important, whether you have children, whether you don't have children, that you participate in the school.
All right, I want to change gears. I just wanted to talk about a little bit about your school board history, but now I just want to talk in general about our community, and then I want to talk about your upcoming run for 3rd District.
Yes, sir.
All right, so how important do you see economics, the economic component in our community as it relates to our businesses and economics in general?
Absolutely. Economics is critical, and with our platform, strategic economic development is key, in that we don't utilize that term as this broad brush term, but we're talking about how can we create additional jobs for people that live in the 3rd District, the people that live in communities that have been underserved and disenfranchised. How can we increase the number of business owners? How many millionaires can we be creating as it relates to leveraging financing and leveraging our resources and our assets in our community? So it's about wealth creation, home ownership, making sure that we have access to livable wage jobs, but not only that, how do we access economic development as it relates to ownership and entrepreneurship?
All right, now that's what we're talking about, because you're on the Kansas City Business Association show, and That's what our members are looking at. What are the current members, including yourself, talking about as it relates to economic opportunity for them?
Absolutely, and we have to utilize the tools that are available to us in order to springboard ourselves into the realm that we would like to be. So, for example, when you look at the Community Improvement District, that is a tool that not many of us use. We have to begin to utilize those things, as well as organization matters. How do we organize through your association to make sure that we have a collective agenda that represents our business owners to take to City Hall? You need someone that is going to be able to effectively advocate, that's going to have the courage and the leadership to take an agenda, because your city council person is a representative that represents your interests. And so it's important that we facilitate that organization so that we have a collective agenda and we can utilize city tools and leverage them to create wealth in our community.
All right. Tell me this. What kind of job do you think our leadership has done in general, given all of the circumstances that we have and challenges that we have in using the digital tools and platforms that are available, especially when we're talking about our youth, what they use? You're trying to get your message across. You're trying to get them to join the NAACP. You're trying to get them to understand what Black Healthcare Coalition's about.
Mm-hmm.
And the other things, like I mentioned, I didn't know about the school board turnover.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that you've mentioned. How do you feel about how our communities use the internet?
It is woefully underutilized, Mr. Nelson, and I'll tell you that it's extremely important for us to start looking at artificial intelligence as it relates to how we're utilizing media, because oftentimes we have our agenda right and what we want to push out on people, right, but we have to utilize social media in a way that we're collecting the thoughts of the masses so that we're speaking to what they want, what they need, what they're excited about. And right now we're not. We
and what you're excited about.
Well, we're
if you're not connected to your community on a day-to-day basis, how are they going to know when you have an epiphany and say, "Hey, I need support behind this idea"?
Well, one of the tenets of servant leadership is that I have to represent the people. And so if I'm not tapping into what it is that they want me to represent, then I'm not going to do an effective job in doing that. But information does flow both ways. Once you are an elected, there's a responsibility to feed back information to those individuals so that they're prepared to make the decisions to ensure that our community is improved.
How many kids do you have, Melissa?
2.
Are they in school?
Yes.
What? How do you feel about their education?
I feel like we're, in the tale of two cities. We're in the best of times, we're in the worst of times. I feel that there is a lot of opportunity that's there to make sure that our kids can excel worldwide. Right now, we're just talking about accreditation by the standards set by Missouri, right? And so, but we need to be thinking about how are we preparing our kids to be able to compete globally. And that's the opportunity that exists, that we need to ensure that every 100% of our kids need to be able to read, write, speak fluently 2 languages, not one, because if you're going to compete globally, you're going to have to be able to have those skills to do so. Technology is hugely important. I really enjoy the Montessori education actually that my child receives right now.
That's what my daughter went when she was young.
Yeah, also. And I mean, it's different culturally because we come from, my family, really believed in, you don't have a choice. Right. But in the Montessori education, it's about, we're going to present these things to you and then you get to have choices.
Open your mind.
Open your mind. But I mean, he is 4 years old and reading at the 3rd grade level. So I'm completely proud of what the Kansas City Public Schools have been able to do for my children.
Switching up, Martin Luther King, do you have anything to talk to our audience about who he was and did that influence his legacy?
Absolutely. The most important thing as it relates when I think about Martin Luther King is really about him sitting in the back of that church and they were looking for someone to lead. This was before he was really big and they were looking for someone to lead and they pointed to him and said, Martin, will you lead this movement? And there was a lot of political talk about who would be the best face, et cetera, et cetera. And he accepted the charge because someone asked him. It wasn't that he put himself out there, and that's what type of leadership we need, in that we cannot say, hey, I have this idea, I want to do this. It's about how have you been positioned to represent a people, and how have you humbled yourself in order to be chosen as that representative. And so that's one of the things that I most appreciate about Dr. King and how I try to leave my legacy, and that it's not about self, but it's about how the community needs to move and operate, and who is the best person that we need to send.
What would you say on closing that you would want your constituents to know?
Well, there is an election coming up in the city of Kansas City. Remember that all politics are local, and it's extremely important that on April 2nd that you get out and vote. I would encourage every one of you who live in the 3rd District to please heavily consider voting for me, Melissa Robinson, for 3rd District.
This program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.